So for this unit, this will be a kindergarten grade level, and the unit title is Living and Non-Living Things. The standards, the Alabama state standards that are being used are to distinguish between living and non-living things and to verify what living things need to survive. There will also be reading standards implemented, such as using grapheme and phoneme correspondence and word analysis skills to decode and encode words, which will demonstrate early phonological and phonemic awareness skills in spoken words as they segment and blend single syllable or CVC words. There are two different genres that I've used within this unit. There's some poetry on living things and some poetry on non-living things. There's also a nonfiction picture book that will be used in day 3 of this unit, called What's Alive by Kathleen Zofeld. So for day 1, we'll start by gathering the students on the floor and having them discuss living things. I would ask them questions such as, are you living? Are your pets at home living? How do you know? What do you need to survive? This will access their prior knowledge and will hook them in the lesson. I'll ask them to turn and talk to their partners in order to discuss their answers to these questions, and they will be able to share their thoughts with the class. Their answers may be, yes, they are living, we are breathing, we move, we need food, etc. Following that discussion, we will start talking about living things. Day 1 of this unit is all about living things. So we will talk about living things, and that is when I'll introduce the first poem called It Is Living. The poem states, it is living, I know why, It breathes and it grows and changes. It breathes and grows and changes. It's alive, it's alive. So I'll read the poem once and then have the students say it with me, repeating each line. Following that, we'll have a PowerPoint presentation with images of living and non-living things. As we go through that PowerPoint, I'll ask the students about each picture. I'll ask them, does it breathe? Does it grow? Does it change? And the students will answer yes, indicating that it is a living thing. Each of these images are of CVC words. For example, there might be a picture of a cat, or a bug, or a rat, etc. As the students identify orally which image is a living thing, they will be asked to use their fingers to tell me the sounds in each word. For example, tell me the sounds in cat. The students will hold up a finger and say k, a, t, and they will have 3 fingers up at the end, indicating 3 sounds in the word. Then I'll ask them to write these words. After they have segmented them, they'll use an expo marker and a small whiteboard to do so. This will allow me to assess their abilities to encode these CVC words. And as the students do this, the teacher will be walking the room and assisting. To end this lesson, they'll have an activity sheet titled, Is It Living?, which will be very similar to the PowerPoint presentation. It will also contain an image of a living thing, and it will ask the students questions. Does it grow? Does it move? Does it breathe? And does it reproduce or make more? The students will have to color in a smiley face if the answer is yes. If their answer is no, they will color in a frowny face. Answering these questions will help them to identify whether the object is living or non-living. Then moving on to day 2, we'll focus more on non-living things. I'll begin by kind of reviewing materials from day one using an anchor chart. I will introduce an anchor chart about living things. The students will use this anchor chart to access their prior knowledge from day one of living things. They will become engaged when I ask them to turn and talk to their neighbor and tell them some examples of living things which we discussed in day one. They will then get to chant their poem from day one that we went over together. They will then be introduced to a new poem, a similar poem, about non-living things. This poem states, "It's non-living, it's non-living, I know why, I know why. It stays the same forever, it stays the same forever. It can't change, it can't change." They will sing it once, and the students will be engaged as they sing with me, repeating each line of the poem. Following this review of day one and the introduction of that non-living poem, the students I will provide a second anchor chart focusing on non-living things. They will then engage in turn and talk and discuss with their neighbors some more examples of non-living things. Then they will engage in that same PowerPoint presentation in which we did in day one, containing the same images of living things and non-living things. Only this time they will be identifying the non-living objects within the PowerPoint. And as we go through, I'll ask them questions such as, can it breathe? Does it change? Does it grow? Same thing. In order to help them indicate the non-living things. Each of these, again, are CVC words, so as the students identify the non-living objects, I will ask them again to segment the word. For example, if it's an image of a hat, I'll ask them to tell me the sounds in hat. At. They will then segment it, get their expo markers and their dry erase boards, and encode it and write it on their boards. This will allow me to assess, again, their abilities to encode CVC words accurately. To end this lesson, they will engage in another activity sheet. This activity sheet will contain a variety of images. The students will be asked to draw a circle around each image that is non-living and draw an X over the images that are living. This will allow me to assess their abilities to identify non-living things. Now on day 3, since we talked about living things in day 1, non-living things in day 2, day 3 is kind of an overall review of both of those things. So we'll go over, in the introduction, we'll go over both living things and non-living things. We'll go over both of those anchor charts, and they'll get to turn and talk to their neighbors, discuss examples that we've gone over in this lesson, in this unit, and get to recite their poems again. For the instructional sequence of day 3, the students will engage in a read aloud. There will be a nonfiction story, What's Alive? I will read that to them, and the students will engage as I stop and point to each illustration, and I'll ask them prompting questions such as, is this alive? Pointing to an image. The students will be required to give a thumbs up if it is alive and a thumbs down if it is not. If it is a living thing, I may ask the students, how do you know? Does it breathe? Does it change? And they will engage in that discussion. Finally, they will have a little fun activity. They will be broken into small groups, and they will use expo markers. Actually, I would go to their table and draw a T-chart on their table with an expo marker, one side being labeled living things and the other being labeled non-living. So they'll be broken into groups at each table, with their T-charts, and then each group will be provided with little objects or little toys of different animals, people, objects around the room, etc. And they will have to work together to sort them into the correct categories. And then to close this unit, after they have done work together with their groups, they will then get to travel the room and look at every other group, and they'll have an activity sheet with a T-chart very similar to the one on their table, and they'll be required to record living things and non-living things on their own personal T-charts from all the different groups. So they'll be walking the room, recording data from each group. This will allow me to overall assess their abilities to distinguish living and non-living things, and also their abilities to see those words, recognize those sounds, and write them and encode them on their data sheets.